The courthouse doors slammed open with such force that every head in the Lagos family court turned. There stood Adunni Okafor, her 6-inch Louboutin heels clicking against the marble floor like thunder. The woman who had been dismissed as a worthless housewife just 6 months ago now commanded the room in a tailored Ankara dress that cost more than most people's monthly salary. What would you do if you walked in on this? Hit like if you've been betrayed, and comment below where you're watching from. Across the courtroom, Emeka Okafor's jaw dropped. The man who had publicly humiliated his wife, calling her nothing but a burden during their messy separation, now stared in disbelief. His expensive lawyer, who had been confident about crushing the poor housewife, suddenly looked uncertain. "Your Honor," Adunni's voice rang clear and strong, "I'm ready to proceed with the divorce settlement." Emeka had been waiting for this moment, planning to mock her in front of everyone. He'd told his friends at the Lagos Island Golf Club that she'd come crawling back, begging for scraps. Instead, she looked like royalty. "Adunni," Emeka whispered, his voice cracking. "How did you?" She didn't even glance his way. 6 months ago, she had discovered her husband's betrayal in the most devastating way possible. It was a Thursday evening in their Victoria Island home when she'd returned early from visiting her sister in Surulere. The house was unusually quiet, and she could hear strange sounds from their bedroom upstairs. Her heart had pounded as she climbed the stairs, designer handbag clutched tight. The bedroom door was slightly ajar, and what she saw shattered 20 years of marriage into a million pieces. Emeka, her husband of 2 decades, was in their marital bed with Chioma, her own younger sister. The domestic betrayal cut deeper than any knife. These weren't strangers. This was family destroying family. Chioma, who had lived in their home for 3 years while attending university, who had called Adunni sister mother, was now moaning beneath Adunni's husband. 20 years, Emeka, she had screamed that night. 20 years, I gave you everything. But Emeka had shown no remorse. Instead, he'd laughed coldly. You think you deserve better? You're nothing without me, Adunni. Just a housewife who can't even give me a son. The emotional manipulation had continued for weeks. He'd threatened to leave her with nothing, claiming she had no skills, no education that mattered, no way to survive without him. He'd frozen their joint accounts, changed the locks on their Banana Island mansion, and moved Chioma in as his new woman. But Emeka had made one crucial mistake. He'd underestimated the woman who had managed his household, his business contacts, and his social life for 20 years. The woman who knew every secret, every deal, every hidden asset he thought she was too stupid to understand. Now, as Judge Adebayo called the court to order, Adunni's lawyer, one of Lagos's most expensive, stood with a briefcase full of evidence that would change everything. Mr. Okafor, the judge began, your wife's legal team has submitted some interesting documentation regarding your business dealings. Emeka's face went pale. His own lawyer frantically whispered in his ear, but it was too late. The woman he dismissed as powerless had spent 6 months building a case that would destroy him. As Adunni finally turned to look at her soon-to-be ex-husband, her eyes held no tears, no pain, only the cold fire of revenge. The Bentley waiting outside was just the beginning. Your Honor, she said smoothly, I have evidence of my husband's infidelity, financial fraud, and illegal business practices that I believe this court will find very enlightening. Emeka's world began to crumble, and everyone in that courtroom knew it. But how had a discarded housewife become the most powerful woman in the room? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more gripping stories like this. What do you think happens next? Comment below. 6 months earlier, the night of the betrayal still burned in Adunni's memory like acid. After catching Emeka and Chioma together, she had fled to her childhood friend Kemi's apartment in Ikeja, tears streaming down her face as Lagos traffic crawled around her battered Honda. He called me worthless, Kemi, Adunni sobbed into her friend's arms. Said I was nothing, but a burden who couldn't even give him a son. Kemi Adelik, now a successful tech entrepreneur, held her friend tight. That man is a fool, Adunni. You raised his daughter Funmi like your own child. You managed his business relationships. You made him the man he is today. But the emotional wounds ran deeper than anyone could see. 20 years of marriage, and Adunni had poured everything into making Emeka successful. She'd given up her own dreams of becoming a lawyer to support his construction business. She'd hosted countless dinners for his clients, managed his social calendar, and turned their home into a sanctuary where deals were made and relationships flourished. "I don't even have my own bank account anymore," Adunni whispered. "He made me close it years ago, said wives shouldn't handle money." That's when Kemi's eyes lit up with an idea that would change everything. "Do you remember what you told me about Emeka's business meetings? The ones he had at your house every Friday?" Adunni nodded, confused. "The construction contracts with the state government." "Why?" "Because, my dear friend, you were present for those meetings. You served them drinks, you cleaned up their documents they left behind. You know more about his business than he realizes." Kemi pulled out her laptop and began typing furiously. As the founder of Data Secure Nigeria, she had connections throughout Lagos's business and legal community. "Adunni, I'm going to ask you to remember everything. Every conversation you overheard, every document you saw, every person who came to your house. Because if what I suspect is true, your husband hasn't just been cheating on you. He's been cheating the government." Over the next 3 hours, the two women pieced together a puzzle that made Adunni's blood run cold. The Friday meetings weren't just about legitimate construction contracts. Emeka had been inflating costs, using substandard materials, and paying bribes to government officials to overlook safety violations. "He's been using our home as the headquarters for corruption," Adunni realized, her voice shaking with rage rather than sadness now. Kemi made a phone call to someone she called my contact at the EFCC. The Economic and Financial Crimes Commission had been investigating government contract fraud for months. "They need evidence," Kemi explained. "Documentation, recordings, witness testimony. And who better to provide it than the woman who was there for everything?" But gathering evidence would be dangerous. Emeka had already shown he was ruthless, moving Chioma into their family home and treating Adunni like she never existed. He told their 19-year-old daughter Funmi that her stepmother had abandoned the family. "If he finds out what I'm doing," Adunni started. "He won't," Kemi interrupted. "Because everyone still sees you as just a broken housewife. They don't know you're about to become their worst nightmare." The plan was simple but brilliant. Adunni would return to the house during the day when Emeka was at work, using her intimate knowledge of his habits and hiding places to gather evidence. Meanwhile, Kemi would use her tech skills to help build an airtight case. But as they sat planning in Kemi's apartment, neither woman realized that Chioma had already begun feeding Emeka lies about Adunni's activities. And Emeka, paranoid about his secrets, had hired someone to watch his estranged wife's every move. The phone rang just as they finished their strategy session. It was an unknown number. "Adunni." The voice was male, unfamiliar. "This is Inspector Taiwo from Zone 2 Police Command. Your husband has filed a restraining order against you. You're not allowed within 500 meters of your family home." Adunni's heart sank. Emeka was already 3 steps ahead, cutting off her access to the evidence she needed. How could she gather proof of his crimes if she couldn't even get near their house? But as she hung up the phone, Kemi was already smiling. "He just made his biggest mistake," her friend said quietly. "Because now we know he's scared. And scared men make stupid decisions." The game of revenge was about to begin, but Emeka had no idea that his discarded wife was playing chess while he was still playing checkers. The question was, who would make the first real move? Like this story so far? Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. What would you do in Adunni's situation? 2 weeks after the restraining order, Adunni sat in the elegant office of Barrister Folake Williams, one of Lagos's most feared divorce attorneys. The woman across from her was known for destroying cheating husbands and had never lost a high-profile case. "Mrs. Okafor," Barrister Williams began, her voice sharp as glass, "your husband thinks he's been clever. Restraining order, frozen accounts, character assassination. Classic tactics of a man trying to intimidate his wife into accepting nothing." Adunni gripped her hands tightly. The past weeks had been hell. Emeka had not only moved Chioma fully into their home, but had also started spreading rumors throughout their social circle that Adunni was mentally unstable and had abandoned her family responsibilities. "He's turned my own daughter against me," Adunni said, her voice barely a whisper. "Funmi won't even take my calls." "About that," the lawyer said, sliding a file across the desk, "I've had some interesting conversations with your stepdaughter. It seems young Funmi isn't as convinced by her father's story as he thinks." Adunni's heart leaped. Funmi, Emeka's daughter from his first marriage, had been like her own child for 15 years. The girl was now 19 and studying business administration at the University of Lagos. "She reached out to my office yesterday," Barrister Williams continued. "Apparently, she's very uncomfortable with how quickly Chioma moved into her deceased mother's bedroom." This was news to Adunni. She had thought Funmi supported her father completely. What did she say? That her father has been acting strangely, nervous, making phone calls at odd hours, and that Chioma has been asking a lot of questions about the family's financial situation. Suddenly, the office door opened and a young woman walked in. Funmi Okafor was tall and elegant like her late mother, but she had Emeka's determined eyes. Those eyes were now filled with tears as she saw Adunni. "Mama Adunni," Funmi said, using the affectionate name she'd called her stepmother for years. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know the truth about what happened." Adunni stood and embraced the girl who had been her daughter in everything but blood. "What truth, my dear?" "About Daddy and Aunt Chioma. I thought you left us. But then I came home unexpectedly last week and heard them talking." Funmi's voice shook with disgust. They were laughing about how they'd been together for over a year. "A whole year, Mama, while you were taking care of all of us." The betrayal cut even deeper than Adunni had imagined. It wasn't just a moment of weakness. It had been a calculated, ongoing deception. Barrister Williams leaned forward. "Funmi, are you prepared to testify about what you've observed in your father's house?" The young woman nodded firmly. "Yes. And there's something else. Daddy has been burning documents in the backyard every night. Boxes and boxes of papers. Chioma told him he was being paranoid, but he said there were things about his business that could destroy everything." Adunni and the lawyer exchanged glances. This was the break they needed. "There's more," Funmi continued. "Yesterday, some men came to the house looking for Daddy. They said they were from EFCC. Daddy wasn't home, but they left their card and said they'd be back." The Economic and Financial Crimes Commission was already closing in. Emeka's world was crumbling faster than even Adunni had hoped. But then Funmi's expression changed to one of fear. "Mama, I think Daddy knows I've been asking questions. This morning, Chioma suggested that maybe I should go study abroad, for my own good. They want to send me away." Barrister Williams stood immediately. "We need to move fast. If Emeka suspects his daughter might testify against him, he'll do everything possible to silence her or get her out of the country." "What do we do?" Adunni asked. "We accelerate our timeline. I'll file for an emergency hearing tomorrow. But tonight, Funmi needs to disappear. If your husband is as desperate as he sounds, there's no telling what he might do." As if on cue, Funmi's phone buzzed with a text message. Her face went white as she read it. "It's from Chioma," she whispered. "She says Daddy wants to see me immediately. That there's been a family emergency, and I need to come home right now." The trap was being set, but for whom? Had Emeka discovered his daughter's betrayal, or was this the moment Adunni had been waiting for? The chance to turn the tables on the man who had destroyed her life? One thing was certain. The next 24 hours would determine who would emerge victorious in this war of domestic betrayal and revenge. What do you think Emeka is planning? Comment your thoughts on this betrayal. Don't forget to share this with someone who loves drama. The emergency family meeting was a trap, but not the kind anyone expected. Funmi had agreed to go back to the house, but she wasn't going alone. Hidden in her designer handbag was a recording device provided by Barrister Williams, and parked 2 streets away was Adunni, waiting in Kemi's car with a direct line to the EFCC. As Funmi walked through the gates of what had once been her family home, she felt like a stranger. Chioma had already redecorated the living room, removing all traces of Adunni's 20-year presence. Photos had been replaced, furniture rearranged, and the warm family atmosphere had been replaced with something cold and artificial. "There's my beautiful daughter," Emeka said as she entered the parlor, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. He looked haggard, older than his 52 years, and there was a nervous energy about him that made Funmi's skin crawl. Chioma sat beside him on the sofa, wearing one of Adunni's expensive traditional wrappers, as if she belonged there. She was only 28, just 9 years older than Funmi, and the twisted family dynamic made everyone uncomfortable. "Sit down, Funmi. We need to discuss your future," Emeka began. "My future." Funmi kept her voice neutral, remembering Barrister Williams' instructions to let him talk. "Yes, your stepmother has been filling your head with lies, and I think it's best if you complete your education abroad. I've already contacted some universities in London." Chioma leaned forward, her voice honey-sweet, but her eyes calculating. "We think the stress of the divorce is affecting you, darling. A fresh start would be good for everyone." Funmi felt rage building in her chest. These two people had destroyed her family and now wanted to exile her to cover their tracks. "What about Mama Adunni?" she asked carefully. "Don't you think I should hear her side of the story?" Emeka's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the cold fury beneath. "That woman abandoned this family. She's mentally unstable, Funmi. I have medical reports to prove it." "Medical reports?" Funmi's voice sharpened. This was news to everyone. "Your stepmother has been under psychiatric care for months," Chioma added smoothly. "Depression, paranoid delusions. The doctors say she's not fit to be around family." The lies were so elaborate, so calculated, that Funmi realized this had been planned for a long time. They hadn't just betrayed Adunni. They had been systematically destroying her reputation and preparing to have her declared mentally incompetent. "I see," Funmi said quietly. "And what about your business, Daddy? I heard some government officials were asking questions." Emeka's eyes went cold as ice. "What government officials?" "The men who came here yesterday." Chioma mentioned they were asking about contracts. Father and girlfriend exchanged a look that confirmed Funmi's worst fears. They were both deeper in this corruption than anyone had imagined. "Funmi." Emeka's voice became dangerously quiet. "Who have you been talking to?" Before she could answer, her phone buzzed. It was a text from Adunni. "Get out now. Police are coming." But it was too late. Emeka had seen her phone screen, and his face transformed into something Funmi had never seen before. Pure rage mixed with desperation. "You little betrayer," he snarled, lunging for her phone. "You've been working with that witch all along." Funmi jumped back, but Chioma was already moving to block the door. The sweet, innocent facade had disappeared completely, replaced by something cold and calculating. "Emeka, calm down," Chioma said, but her voice was excited rather than worried. "We knew this might happen. That's why we prepared." "Prepared what?" Funmi demanded, backing toward the window. Emeka pulled out his own phone and made a call. "It's time." "Yes, bring the papers. And bring the doctor." Funmi's blood turned to ice. They were going to have her declared mentally unstable, just like they tried to do to Adunni. She'd be locked away in some private facility while they destroyed all the evidence. But as she heard cars pulling up outside, she realized the sounds weren't what Emeka was expecting. These weren't private cars, they were official vehicles, and there were a lot of them. "Emeka Okafor." The voice boomed through a bullhorn. "This is the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission. You are surrounded. Come out with your hands visible." Chioma's face went white. "You said you cleaned everything up. You said there was no evidence." "Shut up," Emeka snapped, but his hands were shaking as he peered through the curtains. "How did they find out?" Funmi smiled grimly. "Maybe because you underestimated the woman you called worthless." Through the window, she could see more than just EFCC vehicles. There were police cars, media vans, and standing right in the middle of it all was Adunni, no longer looking like a broken housewife, but like the powerful woman she'd always been underneath. The front door exploded inward as tactical officers stormed the house. as Emeka and Chioma were forced to their knees in handcuffs. Funmi realized that her stepmother hadn't just been planning revenge. She'd been orchestrating the complete destruction of everyone who had betrayed her. But this was only the beginning. As the officers read Emeka his rights, one of them held up a warrant that made Funmi's eyes go wide. They weren't just arresting him for corruption. They were charging him with conspiracy, fraud, money laundering, and something that made her stomach turn: conspiracy to commit kidnapping and unlawful detention. The medical papers weren't just to discredit Adunni. They'd been planning to have her institutionalized permanently. How far had this betrayal really gone? And what other secrets were about to come to light? Hit that like button if you're shocked by this twist. What do you think they were really planning? The Lagos State High Court had never seen anything like it. Media crews lined the streets outside, and social media was buzzing with hashtags like #JusticeForAdunni and #Emeka's What had started as a simple divorce case had exploded into one of Nigeria's biggest corruption scandals. Inside the courthouse, Adunni sat with quiet dignity as Barrister Williams presented evidence that left everyone stunned. Bank statements showing millions of naira stolen from government contracts. Audio recordings of Emeka bribing officials. And most damning of all, a paper trail showing how he'd planned to have Adunni declared mentally incompetent and locked away in a private psychiatric facility. "Your Honor," Barrister Williams announced, "we have evidence that Mr. Okafor not only committed adultery and financial fraud, but also conspiracy to unlawfully detain his wife. Dr. Adebisi Ogundimu will testify that Mr. Okafor approached him about falsifying medical records." The courtroom gasped as Dr. Ogundimu, a respected psychiatrist, took the stand. His hands shook as he spoke. "Mr. Okafor offered me 10 million naira to declare his wife mentally unstable," the doctor testified. "He said she was becoming a problem and needed to be removed from society permanently. When I refused, he threatened to destroy my practice." Adunni felt a chill run down her spine. She had suspected Emeka was cruel, but this level of calculated evil was beyond her worst nightmares. He hadn't just wanted to divorce her. He'd wanted to erase her completely. Emeka, sitting with his lawyer, looked nothing like the confident businessman he'd once been. His expensive suits couldn't hide the fact that he was a broken man facing decades in prison. Chioma sat in the gallery, already distancing herself from the man she'd helped destroy. But the biggest shock came when Prosecutor Adeyemi called an unexpected witness. "Your Honor, we call Mrs. Folashade Okafor to the stand." An elderly woman entered the courtroom, and Adunni's heart stopped. It was Emeka's mother, the woman who had treated Adunni like a daughter for 20 years. "Mama Folashade," Adunni whispered, tears starting to flow for the first time since this ordeal began. The older woman looked directly at her son with disappointment and disgust. "Your Honor, I must speak about what I witnessed in my son's character over the past year." "Objection," Emeka's lawyer shouted. "Hearsay. Overruled. Please continue, Mrs. Okafor." Mama Folashade's voice was strong despite her 78 years. "My son came to me 6 months ago, asking me to support his claim that Adunni was mentally unstable. He wanted me to sign papers saying she had always been strange and unreliable. When I refused, he threatened to cut me off from seeing my granddaughter." The betrayal ran even deeper than anyone had realized. Emeka had been willing to turn his own mother into a weapon against his wife. He told me that Adunni had become dangerous to the family's reputation and needed to be dealt with permanently. Those were his exact words, dealt with permanently. A collective gasp filled the courtroom. This wasn't just about money or infidelity anymore. This was about a man who had been planning to destroy his wife's life completely. Furthermore, Mama Folashade continued, "I have recordings of these conversations. My grandson taught me how to use my phone to record because I was afraid of what my son might do to me if I opposed him." The prosecution played the recordings and Emeka's voice filled the courtroom, cold and calculating, as he discussed different ways to neutralize Adunni's ability to cause problems for his business. As the recordings played, Adunni watched Emeka's face crumble. His own mother had outsmarted him, gathering evidence of his true nature. But then something happened that no one expected. Chioma suddenly stood up in the gallery. "Your Honor," she called out, "I have something to add." The courtroom erupted in whispers as Chioma made her way forward. Emeka's lawyer tried to stop her, but she pushed past him. "I was threatened too," she announced, her voice shaking. "Emeka said if I didn't help him get rid of Adunni permanently, he would have me deported and make sure I never saw my family again." This was a stunning reversal. Chioma had been Adunni's betrayer, but now she was claiming to be another victim. "He made me seduce him," Chioma continued, tears streaming down her face. "He said it was the only way to break Adunni mentally. He planned the whole thing, including making sure she would catch us together." Adunni felt her world spinning. Even the betrayal that had destroyed her marriage had been orchestrated? How deep did Emeka's manipulation really go? "He has other women too," Chioma added desperately. "Other wives he's planning to destroy the same way. I have their names, their photos. This isn't his first time doing this." The judge called for order as the courtroom exploded in chaos. Emeka was shouting at Chioma to shut up, his lawyer was frantically trying to control the damage, and reporters were frantically taking notes. But as the dust settled, one thing became clear. This case was far from over. If Chioma was telling the truth, Emeka Okafor wasn't just a corrupt businessman and cheating husband. He was a serial predator who had been destroying women's lives for years. The question now was, how many other victims were out there, and would they have the courage to come forward? What do you think about Chioma's confession? Is she telling the truth or trying to save herself? Comment below. 3 days after Chioma's shocking courtroom confession, Adunni sat in Kemi's office, staring at a stack of files that made her stomach turn. Women from across Lagos had come forward after seeing the news coverage, each with a story that sounded eerily similar to her own. "There are 12 of them," Kemi said quietly, her tech company now serving as an unofficial headquarters for what the media was calling the Emeka Files. 12 women whose lives he systematically destroyed. The first file belonged to Ngozi Adekunle, a successful accountant who had been married to Emeka's business partner. According to her statement, Emeka had orchestrated her husband's bankruptcy, then swooped in to help her when she was vulnerable. Within months, he had convinced her to sign over her properties and had her declared mentally unstable when she tried to fight back. She spent 2 years in a private psychiatric facility, Adunni read aloud, her voice shaking. Her children were told she was dead. The second file was even worse. Bukola Adebayo had been a successful fashion designer until Emeka targeted her thriving business. He had romanced her, convinced her to make him a business partner, then slowly poisoned her professional relationships while draining her accounts. He's not just a cheating husband, Adunni realized. He's a predator who specializes in destroying successful women. Kemi nodded grimly. The pattern is always the same. He identifies women with money or property, infiltrates their lives, destroys their support systems, then takes everything while making them look crazy or incompetent. But the most shocking file belonged to someone Adunni knew, Mrs. Adenike Ogilvy, a wealthy widow who had been one of Emeka's early business clients. She hired Emeka to build her late husband's memorial hospital in Abuja, Adunni read. The project was supposed to cost 500 million naira. Instead, he inflated the cost to 2 billion, built it with substandard materials, and when she complained, she was found dead in her home. The police ruled it suicide, but her family never believed it. Adunni's blood ran cold. Was her husband not just a fraud and manipulator, but potentially a murderer? Before she could process this fully, Barrister Williams burst into the office with news that changed everything. The EFCC has arrested Emeka's doctor friend, and he's talking, she announced breathlessly. Dr. Ogundamu isn't the only medical professional Emeka was bribing. There's an entire network of doctors, lawyers, and government officials who have been helping him destroy women's lives for over a decade. How is this possible? Adunni asked. How did no one notice? Because he was very careful about choosing his victims, the lawyer explained. Successful women without strong family support systems. Widows, divorcees, women whose families lived far away. He made sure they were isolated before he struck. The scope of the conspiracy was staggering. Emeka hadn't just been stealing money from government contracts. He'd been running a criminal enterprise designed to systematically destroy and rob successful women. But there's more, Barrister Williams continued. Chioma wasn't his only inside person. He had women working in banks, law firms, hospitals, and government offices. An entire network designed to make his victims look unstable or incompetent while he stole their assets. Adunni felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of what they'd uncovered. She had thought she was just getting revenge on a cheating husband. Instead, she'd exposed one of Nigeria's most sophisticated criminal organizations. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we make sure every single victim gets justice," Kemi said firmly. "And we make sure this never happens to another woman." But as they spoke, Adunni's phone rang with a call that would complicate everything. It was Funmi, and she was crying. "Mama Adunni, you need to come to the hospital immediately," she sobbed. "It's Grandma Folashade. Someone attacked her this morning." The room went silent. Mama Folashade, the brave woman who had testified against her own son, was now lying in a Lagos hospital bed, beaten unconscious by unknown attackers. "Is she?" Adunni couldn't finish the question. "She's alive, but barely," Funmi cried. "The doctors say someone hit her with a metal object. They're saying it might be attempted murder." As Adunni rushed toward the door, Barrister Williams grabbed her arm. "Adunni, you need to understand what this means," she said urgently. "If someone tried to kill Mama Folashade to silence her, then this conspiracy goes deeper than we thought. And if they're willing to attack an elderly woman, the implication hung in the air like a death sentence. If Emeka's network was willing to commit violence to protect their secrets, then every woman who had come forward was now in danger, including Adunni herself." As she raced through Lagos traffic toward the hospital, she realized that exposing the truth had made her the biggest target of all. The woman who had started this fight for justice might not live to see its conclusion. Who ordered the attack on Mama Folashade, and how far will they go to protect their secrets? Share this story with someone who needs to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe for the shocking conclusion. The University College Hospital's intensive care unit had become an armed camp. Police officers stood guard outside Mama Folashade's room, while inside, the 78-year-old woman lay unconscious, her head wrapped in bandages, and machines monitoring her vital signs. Adunni sat beside the bed, holding the older woman's hand and fighting back tears. Mama Folashade had been more than a mother-in-law. She had been the mother Adunni had lost at age 16. Now she was paying the price for her courage. The attack was professional, Inspector Taiwo explained to the gathering in the hospital corridor. Single blow to the back of the head with a blunt instrument. The attacker knew exactly how much force to use to incapacitate without immediately killing. Dr. Adeyemi, the attending physician, looked grim. "She's stable, but there's significant brain swelling. The next 24 hours will be critical." Funmi stood pressed against the wall, her face pale with shock and guilt. "This is my fault," she whispered. "I should have protected her better." "No," Adunni said firmly, standing to embrace her stepdaughter. "This is the fault of the people who ordered this attack, and we're going to find them." Barrister Williams arrived with news that made everyone's blood run cold. "Emeka's bail hearing is scheduled for tomorrow morning," she announced. "His lawyer is claiming he's been unfairly detained and that the charges against him are politically motivated." Bail. Adunni couldn't believe it. After everything we've proven, his legal team has connections. They're arguing that he's not a flight risk and that the evidence against him is circumstantial. Inspector Taiwo shook his head. "If Emeka gets out on bail, every witness in this case is in mortal danger. This attack on his mother proves he's willing to kill to protect himself." But as they spoke, Kemi arrived with information that would change the entire game. "I've been analyzing Emeka's financial records with my tech team," she announced, pulling out a tablet. "We found something the EFCC missed. He's been moving money to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, but that's not the interesting part." She showed them a series of financial transactions. 3 days ago, someone transferred 50 million naira from one of his hidden accounts. The money went to a company called Security Solutions Lagos. Inspector Taiwo's eyes went wide. That's a front company for hired killers. We've been investigating them for months. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. Emeka hadn't just orchestrated the attack on his mother. He had paid professional criminals to silence her permanently. There's more, Kemi continued, her voice tight with anger. The same company received payments connected to the deaths of 3 other women who were investigating Emeka's business practices, including Mrs. Adunni Ogilvy. Adunni felt the room spinning around her. Her husband wasn't just a fraud and manipulator. He was a serial killer who had been murdering women for years. We need to move fast, Inspector Taiwo said, already on his radio calling for backup. If Emeka gets bail tomorrow, he'll disappear, and all the witnesses will start dying. But as they planned their next move, a nurse came running down the corridor with news that stopped everyone cold. Mrs. Okafor, she called to Adunni, your mother-in-law is awake, and she's asking for you. Inside the ICU room, Mama Folashade's eyes were open but filled with pain. Her voice was barely a whisper when she spoke. Adunni, my child, come closer. Adunni leaned in, tears flowing freely as she saw the woman who had stood up to her own son, fighting for each breath. I remember, Mama Folashade whispered. The man who attacked me, I saw his face before he hit me. Don't try to talk, Mama. Rest. No, you must know. The older woman gripped Adunni's hand with surprising strength. It wasn't a stranger. It was Tund, Emeka's business partner, the one who helped him destroy that accountant woman. The revelation sent shockwaves through everyone present. Tund Adeyemi was a respected businessman, a pillar of Lagos society who served on charity boards and was frequently photographed with government officials. He said, Mama Folashade struggled to continue. He said this was a warning, that if I testified again, next time they wouldn't miss. Inspector Taiwo was already making calls, but Barrister Williams looked worried. Tund Adeyemi has connections everywhere, she said quietly. Police, judiciary, government. If he's involved in this conspiracy, it means it goes to the very top of Lagos society. Suddenly, the lights in the hospital corridor went out. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in an eerie red glow. That's not normal, Dr. Adeyemi said, moving toward the corridor. Our backup systems are. His words were cut off by the sound of footsteps in the stairwell. Multiple sets of boots, moving with military precision. Everyone get down. Inspector Taiwo shouted, drawing his weapon. But it was too late. The ICU doors burst open, and 6 men in black tactical gear stormed in, their faces covered and weapons drawn. Nobody move, the lead attacker commanded. We're here for the old woman and anyone who's been talking too much. Adunni threw herself across Mama Folashade's bed, trying to shield her with her own body. These weren't just hired thugs, they were professional killers, and they had come to finish what they started. But as the attackers moved toward the bed, something unexpected happened. The hospital's main power came back on, and with it came the sound of sirens, lots of them. Inspector Taiwo smiled grimly as he kept his weapon trained on the attackers. Did you really think we weren't expecting this? The trap had been set, and Emeka's killers had walked right into it. But as police officers flooded the ICU, Adunni realized that this was far from over. If Tund Adeyemi was willing to send armed killers into a public hospital, what would he do when he realized his assassination team had been captured? The war for justice had become a fight for survival, and the most dangerous battles were still to come. Hit that subscribe button now. The stakes have never been higher. What do you think will happen to Adunni next? The Lagos State High Court had never been under such heavy security. Armed police units surrounded the building, while inside, Emeka Okafor sat in the defendant's chair looking like a man who had lost everything. The failed hospital attack had backfired spectacularly, providing the final evidence needed to deny his bail and expose the full scope of his criminal network. Adunni entered the courtroom wearing a stunning blue Ankara dress that commanded respect. Gone was any trace of the broken housewife Emeka had tried to destroy. In her place stood a woman who had not only survived, but had become the architect of justice for dozens of victims. Your Honor, Prosecutor Adeyemi announced, the state will present evidence that Mr. Emeka Okafor was the head of a criminal organization responsible for the systematic financial destruction of successful women, multiple murders, and conspiracy to commit terrorism. The word terrorism sent a shock through the packed courtroom. What had started as a divorce case had become one of Nigeria's largest criminal prosecutions. Tunde Adeyemi, Emeka's former business partner, sat in shackles beside him. The man who had ordered the attack on Mama Folashade now looked nothing like the respected businessman he'd pretended to be. His arrest had triggered a domino effect, bringing down corrupt officials, judges, and business leaders across Lagos. The defendants operated what we call a Black Widow scheme, the prosecutor continued. They specifically targeted wealthy, successful women, destroyed their reputations and support systems, then seized their assets while making them appear mentally unstable or dead. As evidence was presented, the courtroom learned the full horror of what these men had done. Bank records showed they had stolen over 20 billion naira from their victims. Medical records revealed at least 8 women had been forcibly institutionalized on false psychiatric evaluations. And most chilling of all, police had found evidence linking them to the deaths of 12 women over the past decade. Mrs. Adunni Ogilvy did not commit suicide, the prosecutor stated. She was murdered because she discovered the defendants were using substandard materials in her Memorial Hospital project, endangering public safety. Adunni watched Emeka's face as the evidence mounted against him. The man who had called her worthless was now facing life in prison. But she felt no satisfaction, only sadness for all the women who hadn't been as fortunate as she had been. The prosecution's star witness took the stand next, Dr. Shinonso Akwu, the psychiatrist who had been part of their network but had agreed to testify in exchange for leniency. I was approached by Mr. Okafor in 2015, Dr. Akwu testified. He offered me substantial payments to declare certain women mentally incompetent so they could be institutionalized against their will. How many women did you falsely diagnose? The prosecutor asked. 37, the doctor whispered, unable to meet anyone's eyes. A collective gasp filled the courtroom. 37 women had been robbed of their freedom, their sanity questioned, their lives destroyed. Also Emeka could steal their money. But the most powerful testimony came from an unexpected source. Chioma took the stand, no longer the confident woman who had seduced Emeka. She looked broken, haunted by what she had participated in. He told me Adunni was weak, she testified, tears streaming down her face. He said she deserved what was happening to her, because she was too trusting, too naive. But the truth was, he was terrified of her. Terrified? Why? Because she was the only woman who ever really knew him. She saw his kindness, his vulnerabilities, his dreams. And when he decided to become a monster, he knew she would be the one person who could recognize that he wasn't born evil. He had chosen to become it. Adunni felt tears welling up in her eyes. Even now, after everything, there was a part of her that remembered the young man she had fallen in love with 30 years ago. The tragedy wasn't just what Emeka had done to others. It was what he had done to himself. He used to have nightmares, Chioma continued. He would wake up screaming, calling for his first wife, calling for Adunni, begging for forgiveness. But in the morning, he would put on his mask and continue destroying people. The emotional manipulation had cut both ways. Emeka had convinced others to help him destroy women, but in the process, he had destroyed his own soul. As the testimony concluded, Judge Adebayo called for a recess. But as people began filing out of the courtroom, Emeka suddenly stood up. Adunni, he called out, his voice breaking. Adunni, please. The courtroom froze as everyone turned to watch. The man who had tried to have his wife killed was now pleading with her across the room. I never meant for it to go this far, he said, tears streaming down his face. I was so afraid of losing you that I destroyed everything good in my life. Adunni looked at him for a long moment, seeing not the monster he had become, but the broken man underneath. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but firm. You didn't lose me, Emeka. You threw me away. And in doing so, you threw away the only person who could have helped you find your way back to being human. She turned and walked out of the courtroom, leaving behind 20 years of marriage and the man who had chosen to become her enemy. But as she reached the corridor, she found Funmi waiting for her with news that would test her strength one final time. "Mama Adunni," Funmi said, her face grave. "There's something you need to know about the money. All the money Daddy stole. The court is going to give it back to his victims. But there's a problem." "What kind of problem?" "Some of the victims are dead. And their families, they blame you." The final battle was about to begin, but this time Adunni wouldn't be fighting criminals or corrupt officials. She would be fighting the families of the women she had failed to save, people who believed that if she had spoken up sooner, their loved ones might still be alive. What do you think? Was Adunni partially responsible for the other victims? Comment your thoughts below. The community center in Surulere had never hosted a meeting like this one. 43 people sat in metal chairs arranged in a circle, the surviving family members of Emeka Okafor's victims, all staring at Adunni with a mixture of grief, anger, and accusation. "You lived with that monster for 20 years, said Mr. Chukwuka Ogilvy, whose wife had been murdered by Emeka's network. "You had to know what he was doing. You had to know." Adunni sat quietly, absorbing the pain and rage directed at her. She had asked for this meeting, knowing it would be the hardest thing she'd ever done. These families deserved to confront her, to ask their questions, to demand answers she wasn't sure she could give. "My sister trusted him," said Mrs. Ngozi Adebayo, tears streaming down her face. "She called me the day before she died, said she was worried about her business partner. If you had warned people, if you had spoken up." "How could I warn people about something I didn't know?" Adunni asked gently. "I was as much as victim as anyone else in this room." "No." Mr. Ogilvy stood up, his voice shaking with fury. "You were his wife. You lived in his house, managed his social life, knew his business associates. You can't tell me you saw nothing suspicious in 20 years." The accusation hit like a physical blow because there was truth in it. Adunni had noticed things over the years: hushed phone calls, mysterious meetings, women who would appear in Emeka's life and then vanish suddenly. But she had trusted her husband, made excuses for behavior that should have raised red flags. "You're right," she said quietly, and the room fell silent. "I saw signs. I chose to ignore them because I loved my husband and I trusted him. I thought the women who disappeared from his life had simply moved on or lost interest. I never imagined that he was killing them." Mrs. Adebayo's voice was bitter. "That he was destroying them systematically." Kemi, who had been silent in the corner, finally spoke up. "With respect to everyone here, Emeka Okafor was a master manipulator. He spent decades perfecting the art of deception. Even his own daughter didn't know what he was doing. But his wife should have." Mr. Ogilvy shot back. "She should have protected us." The weight of their pain was crushing, but Adunni knew she had to face it completely. She stood up, looking each family member in the eye. "You're absolutely right," she said. "I should have been more suspicious. I should have asked harder questions. I should have trusted my instincts when something felt wrong. And because I didn't, your loved ones paid the ultimate price." The raw honesty seemed to deflate some of the anger in the room, replacing it with a shared grief that was somehow more bearable than the rage. "But I need you to understand something," Adunni continued. "I can't bring back your wives, your sisters, your daughters. I can't undo my failures or Emeka's crimes. But I can make sure that every naira he stole gets returned to your families, and I can make sure this never happens again." "How?" asked Mrs. Bimp Adekunle, speaking for the first time. "How do you stop men like your husband?" Adunni had been preparing for this question for weeks. "By creating a foundation that helps women recognize the warning signs. By lobbying for stronger laws to protect women's financial assets. By making sure that no woman ever has to face what we all faced alone." She pulled out a folder containing documents that represented months of legal work. "Emeka's assets, everything he owned, everything he stole, are being liquidated. after the victims' families are compensated. The remaining money will fund the Folashade Okafor Foundation for Women's Protection, named after his mother, who risked everything to ensure justice was served. How much money are we talking about? Mr. Ogilvy asked. 800 million naira in liquid assets, plus properties worth another 1.2 billion, Barrister Williams, who had been quietly taking notes, replied. Every family here will receive compensation based on what was stolen from your loved one. But more importantly, the foundation will have the resources to help thousands of women. The mood in the room began to shift. The anger was still there, but it was being channeled into something constructive rather than destructive. What about Emeka? Mrs. Adebayo asked. Will he ever pay for what he did? He's been sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, Adunni replied. Tunde Adeyemi and 12 other members of their network received similar sentences. The judges and officials who helped them have been stripped of their positions and are facing their own trials. But then young Kelechi Ogilvy, Mr. Ogilvy's teenage son, asked the question that had been haunting Adunni for months. Mrs. Okafor, if you had divorced him earlier, if you had left him the first time you suspected something was wrong, do you think my mother would still be alive? The room went completely silent. This was the question that kept Adunni awake at night, the guilt that threatened to consume her even in victory. I think about that every day, she answered honestly. And the truth is, I don't know. Maybe your mother would be alive. Maybe others would be too. Or maybe Emeka would have just gotten better at hiding his crimes. The only thing I know for certain is that I can't change the past, but I can influence the future. She looked around the room at the faces of people whose lives had been shattered by her husband's evil and her own willful blindness. I'm not asking for your forgiveness, she said. I don't deserve it. But I am asking for your partnership. Help me make sure no other families have to go through what we've all experienced. Help me turn this tragedy into something that protects other women. One by one, the family members began nodding their agreement. The anger was still there, but it had found a purpose beyond revenge. But as the meeting concluded and people began filing out, Mrs. Adebayo approached Adunni with one final revelation that would change everything. Mrs. Okafor, there's something you should know, she said quietly. My sister wasn't Emeka's only victim in our family. He also targeted our cousin, Amina, 3 years ago. But she survived. Adunni's heart stopped. Survived? You mean she's still alive? Yes. And she's been watching your case very closely. She wants to meet with you tomorrow. Because, according to her, Emeka wasn't the mastermind behind this operation. He was just a foot soldier for something much bigger. As Adunni walked out of the community center, she realized that everything they'd uncovered so far might just be the tip of the iceberg. The conspiracy that had destroyed so many lives was far from over, and the most dangerous revelations were yet to come. What could be bigger than what they'd already exposed? Like this video and share your thoughts in the comments. The penthouse restaurant atop the Eco Hotel offered a spectacular view of Lagos Island, but Adunni barely noticed the scenery. Across from her sat Amina Adebayo, a woman whose survival had potentially exposed a conspiracy that reached to the very heart of Nigeria's power structure. I was supposed to be victim number 48, Amina said, her voice steady but her eyes haunted. Emeka followed the same pattern with me that he used with all the others. Romance, isolation, financial manipulation. But I had something the other women didn't have. What? Adunni leaned forward, sensing that this revelation would change everything. A brother who works for the DSS, the Department of State Services. When I started losing control of my assets, Biodun investigated. What he found made us realize that Emeka wasn't operating alone. He was part of something called the network. Adunni felt her blood run cold. What kind of network? A criminal organization that has been operating for over 15 years, targeting successful African women not just in Nigeria, but across the continent. They have operatives in Kenya, Ghana, South Africa, and Côte d'Ivoire. Their goal isn't just stealing money. It's systematically reducing the number of financially independent women in Africa. The scope of what Amina was describing was staggering. This wasn't just about Emeka's greed. It was about a coordinated effort to destroy women's economic power across an entire continent. But why? Adunni asked. What's the ultimate goal? Control, Amina replied simply. Think about it. If successful women are systematically destroyed or discredited, who benefits? Men who are threatened by women's independence. Politicians who want women to remain financially dependent. Business leaders who see successful women as competition. She pulled out a tablet and showed Adunni a series of documents that made her stomach turn. Bank records showing money flowing from Lagos to Nairobi, from Accra to Johannesburg. A sophisticated financial network designed to fund the destruction of women's lives across Africa. Your husband was just one cell in a much larger organism, Amina continued. And now that he's been arrested, the network is scrambling to cover their tracks. How do you know all this? Adunni asked. Because they've been trying to kill me for 3 years. My brother has kept me hidden, but we've been gathering evidence. Your court case was the breakthrough we needed. It exposed their methods and gave us the legal framework to take them down. But before Adunni could respond, her phone buzzed with a message that made her blood freeze. It was from Funmi. Mama, come to the house immediately. Chioma is here, and she's saying things about you that the police need to hear. 20 minutes later, Adunni arrived at her old family home to find it surrounded by police cars again. Inside, Chioma sat in the parlor looking terrified, with Inspector Taiwo taking notes. Mrs. Okafor, the inspector said grimly, Ms. Chioma has provided us with information that suggests you may be in immediate danger. What kind of danger? Chioma looked up with tears in her eyes. After Emeka's sentencing, I was contacted by people claiming to represent his associates. They said that you had become too dangerous, that you knew too much. They offered me 50 million naira to poison you. The room went silent except for the sound of Adunni's heart pounding. They said it had to look like suicide. Chioma continued. That a guilty wife killing herself after her husband's conviction would be the perfect ending to the story. It would discredit everything you've accomplished and make the other victims' families think you were part of the conspiracy all along. Inspector Taiwo leaned forward. Did you agree to their proposal? I took the meeting, Chioma admitted. I was angry at Adunni for destroying my life. But when they showed me the photos... What photos? Adunni asked. Pictures of the other women who had refused to cooperate with them. What they did to those women before they killed them. Chioma shuddered. I realized that no amount of money was worth becoming a monster like them. Funmi grabbed Adunni's hand tightly. Mama, they want to eliminate you because you've become a symbol. Other women across Africa are coming forward, inspired by your story. The network is losing millions of naira every month as their victims start fighting back. It was true. In the weeks since Emeka's conviction, Adunni had been contacted by women from Kenya, Ghana, and South Africa, all reporting similar patterns of abuse and financial destruction. Her story had sparked a continental movement. But they made one mistake, Chioma said, pulling out a small recording device. I recorded everything they said, including the names of their leaders and their plans for eliminating other problematic women. Inspector Taiwo's eyes lit up. This recording could bring down the entire continental operation. But as they listened to the recording, Adunni heard something that made her realize the true scope of what they were fighting. The voices on the recording weren't just criminals. They were business leaders, politicians, and respected members of society from across Africa. We need to silence not just Adunni Okafor, but the movement she's created, one voice said. Women across Africa are becoming too independent, too financially powerful. It's time to remind them of their place. The conspiracy went beyond criminal enterprise. It was about maintaining patriarchal control across an entire continent. As the recording ended, Adunni stood up with a determination that surprised everyone in the room. They want to silence me, she said firmly. Then let's give them something really worth being afraid of. She turned to Inspector Taiwo. I want to hold a press conference tomorrow. I want to tell the world everything we've learned about the network. And I want to announce the launch of a continental campaign to protect African women from financial predators. Adunni, Funmi said worriedly, that will make you the biggest target in Africa. Good, Adunni replied. Because the biggest targets get the most attention, and attention is exactly what this fight needs. 1 year later, Adunni stood on the steps of the Supreme Court of Nigeria, surrounded by hundreds of women from across Africa. The continental case against the network had resulted in 847 arrests, the recovery of over 50 billion naira in stolen assets, and the establishment of women's protection laws in 12 African countries. The woman who had once been dismissed as just a housewife had become the face of women's economic empowerment across Africa. The Bentley she had arrived in on divorce day had been symbolic, but the movement she had created was transformational. As she looked out at the crowd of women who had found their voices because she had found hers, Adunni smiled. Emeka had tried to destroy her, but instead, he had created the most powerful woman in Africa. The revenge was complete, but the justice was just beginning. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story. Comment below with your thoughts on Adunni's transformation, and let us know where you're watching from. What would you have done in her situation? Turn on notifications so you don't miss our next incredible story of triumph over betrayal.